Of all the things my Uncle Morty left me, the two most significant were his house and his mortal enemy. The house was a charmingly chaotic tinderbox in a sea of beige vinyl. The mortal enemy was Carol, president of the Harmony Creek Estates Homeowners Association, a woman who seemed to subsist on a diet of pure, uncut spite. And on the morning of my uncle's funeral, I was caught squarely between the two. Dave, I appreciate that Morty saw it as a monument to defiant joy. I really do, I said, my voice tight. I was standing on what passed for a lawn, staring up at a 7-foot-tall, hot pink wrought iron flamingo. It leaned at a jaunty angle, as if it had just told a dirty joke at a garden party and was waiting for the reaction. My phone was pressed hard against my ear. But the funeral is in 3 hours. The procession leaves from here, and I'm holding a notice from the HOA that says this flamingo is in violation of Article 4, Section B, Paragraph 3. Lawn ornaments exceeding 4 feet in height or deviating from the approved palette of earth tones. It also says I owe a $100 fine for sustained aesthetic aggression. A beat of silence crackled from the other end of the line, followed by the slow, deliberate sigh of a man who measured his words by the board foot. Frankie, my boy, Dave said, his voice raspy like old sandpaper. You can't move the flamingo. That's a load-bearing flamingo. It's not load-bearing, Dave. It's a flamingo. It's bearing nothing but the judgment of 1,000 relentlessly uniform houses. It's bearing the load of your uncle's spirit, he corrected gently. You move it, the whole vibe of the place collapses. We're talking about the structural integrity of the soul, you know? I knew. God, did I know? My Uncle Morty's soul was woven into every non-regulation inch of this property. While every other house on Serenity Lane looked like it had been 3D printed from the same boring file, Morty's was a testament to a life lived in glorious, clashing color. The siding was rustic cedar when the rules called for light gray vinyl. The mailbox was a miniature replica of a Prohibition-era speakeasy, and a garden gnome, strategically placed behind a perfectly innocent-looking rose bush, was giving the permanent, one-fingered salute to the house directly across the street. Carol's house. As if summoned by the mere thought of her, a pristine white SUV, a vehicle I'd come to think of as the suburban assault vehicle, did a slow, deliberate drive-by. The window was down, and I could see the silhouette of her perfectly coiffed hair and the glint of massive sunglasses. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just slowed to a near stop, made eye contact with me for a solid, unnerving 3 seconds, then tapped her wrist where a watch would be and pointed one perfectly manicured finger at the flamingo. The threat was as clear as if she'd screamed it through a bullhorn. The flamingo's time was up, and by extension, so was mine. She accelerated away, leaving behind nothing but the scent of smug satisfaction and premium gasoline. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. I have to go, Dave. The clock is ticking on my aesthetic aggression. Just breathe, Frankie. Morty wouldn't want you stressing. He'd want you to offer the flamingo a beer. I hung up, glancing at the garish pink bird. It did look a little thirsty. My uncle had bought this house in the late 90s, before Harmony Creek became the self-proclaimed premier planned community it was today. Back then, it was just a new development. But over the years, the HOA, under Carol's increasingly tyrannical leadership, had calcified, its rules growing from sensible guidelines into an unholy tome of suburban dogma. Morty, a retired art teacher and Vietnam vet who believed conformity was a symptom of a dying soul, saw these new rules as a personal declaration of war. And he was a master of guerrilla warfare. Inside, the house was a museum of his gentle rebellion. I was supposed to be looking for a black tie, But my mission was quickly derailed by a treasure trove of historical documents I found in a shoebox on his desk. It was neatly labeled in Morty's familiar scrawl, "Love Letters from Carol." It contained nearly 20 years of HOA violation notices. I pulled a few out at random, reading them aloud to the quiet, dusty air. "Violation notice, June 2015, I began. "Item, unapproved tint on front-facing window. Description: appears to be a crudely taped-on piece of blue cellophane, giving the residence the look of a low-budget discotheque, according to a neighbor's complaint." I remembered that. Morty had claimed it was for an art installation on how light affects mood. Carol had not been amused. I pulled out another. "Violation notice, August 2018. Item, excessive flourishing of squirrels. Description: the resident's non-regulation bird feeder, shaped like a miniature Taj Mahal, is attracting an unnatural abundance of squirrels whose wanton and cavorting nature is disturbing the neighborhood's placid ecosystem." Wanton and cavorting squirrels. Morty had framed that one and hung it in the bathroom. The final one I read was my favorite, a testament to his endurance. Violation notice, January 6th, 2022. Item, failure to comply with seasonal decoration removal timeline. Description: holiday display, a single string of chili pepper-shaped lights, was left on the front porch 37 hours past the approved January 5th, 5 p.m. removal deadline. Fine, $25. I could almost hear Morty's voice, a gravelly chuckle from the great beyond. "Worth every penny, Frankie," he'd told me on the phone at the time. "You should have seen her face when I told her they were for Cinco de Mayo. She started sputtering about cultural appropriation. I think her brain blue-screened. My nostalgia was interrupted by the sight of a massive blue tarp covering a hole in the side of the garage. This was the B-plot to my current tragedy, the main reason for my frantic calls to contractors. Morty, in his infinite wisdom, had decided to start building a soundproof studio for his electric guitar habit a month before he passed. He'd gotten as far as the demolition phase, which apparently consisted of taking a sledgehammer to a non-load-bearing wall. The result was a car-sized hole and an even bigger violation notice from Carol, giving me 14 days to rectify the structural and aesthetic deficiency, or face a fine that escalated faster than a celebrity scandal. This led me to Sal, the pragmatic contractor. I'd called him earlier, hoping for a quick patch job. The conversation had been anything but. "Look, man," Sal's voice had buzzed over the phone, sharp and impatient. "I'm not getting on the wrong side of Harmony Creek. I did a job in there last year, a simple deck extension, and it was easier to get security clearance for the Pentagon. I hear the president over there, Carol, eats contractors for breakfast and spits out their union cards." "It's just a wall, Sal. It needs to be filled with wall-like materials." "Is it an HOA-approved wall?" He'd shot back. "I need to see the paperwork. I need Form 7B/9, the material pre-approval sheet, the color swatch confirmation, and a notarized letter from the Architectural Review Committee stating that the new wall will not, in any way, upset the delicate visual balance of the neighborhood." I'd hung up feeling like I needed a lawyer just to commit an act of basic home repair. A low, respectable rumble from the driveway snapped me back to the present. The hearse had arrived. A long, black, polished Lincoln, so out of place against Morty's chaotic backdrop that it looked like a tuxedoed gentleman who'd wandered into a mosh pit. A few minutes later, 2 more cars pulled up, containing my cousin Sarah, my Aunt Mildred, and a few of Morty's oldest friends. I finally found a tie, a plain black one, thankfully, and went outside to greet them. It was a somber, quiet moment. The absurdity of the morning faded, replaced by the simple, heavy weight of grief. Uncle Morty was really gone. The man who taught me how to paint, how to appreciate bad puns, and how to live a life that didn't fit neatly into a box was now, ironically, about to be put in one. Just then, Dave's beat-up Ford pickup truck rattled to a stop behind the other cars. He wasn't there to work. He was wearing a cleanish flannel shirt that I suspected was his formal wear. He ambled over, holding a small, potted cactus. "For Morty," he said, handing it to me. "Prickly on the outside, but full of life. Just needs a little sun, and a whole lot of leaving it the hell alone." He winked. "Sound like someone we know?" I managed a weak smile. "That's him, all right." "Don't you worry about that wall," he said in a low voice, nodding toward the garage. "Or her." He gestured with his chin down the street. "We'll fix it after. I've got an idea. A little something I like to call malicious compliance." "It'll be beautiful." He clapped me on the shoulder and went to pay his respects to my aunt. The funeral director, a tall, impeccably dressed man named Mr. Henderson, whose face was set in a permanent expression of gentle sorrow, gave me a small nod. It was time. We began to get into our cars. The plan was simple. The hearse would lead, I would follow, and the other two cars would fall in behind us. A small, dignified procession to say goodbye. As I settled into the driver's seat of my own car, I glanced down the street toward the corner of Serenity Lane and Tranquility Drive. My blood went cold. Carol was no longer in her house or her car. She was standing at the corner, waiting. Her posture was ramrod straight, and she was holding her weapon of choice, a clipboard. My heart started hammering against my ribs. No, I thought. She wouldn't. There are lines, sacred lines, even for her. Blocking a funeral? That's not just being a Karen. That's ascending to some dark, mythic level of awfulness. She's just inspecting the petunias. Yes, the perfectly uniform, soulless petunias that line our road to hell. But I knew I was wrong. I was watching a predator waiting for its prey, and the prey was us. The procession began to move. The Lincoln hearse, with my uncle inside, pulled away from the curb with a silent, somber grace. I put my car in drive and followed, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Behind me, I could see the other cars fall into line. We moved slowly, a tiny island of mourning in the placid sea of Harmony Creek. We approached the corner. The world seemed to slow down, the sound fading to a dull roar in my ears. I saw it before the hearse even had to brake. The white SUV. It was parked not along the curb, but perpendicular to it, stretched entirely across our lane of travel like a beached whale. It was a perfect, deliberate, and utterly insane blockade. And standing beside it, arms crossed, clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield, was Carol. A grim, triumphant smirk played on her lips. The hearse's brake lights flashed a sudden, vivid red. The funeral director stopped. I stopped. Everything stopped. The gentle hum of the engines was the only sound in the universe. The sheer, unmitigated, breathtaking audacity of it hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She had actually done it. I was out of my car before I even registered the decision to move. The door slammed shut behind me, a sharp crack in the funereal silence. Mr. Henderson, the funeral director, was already getting out of the lead car, his expression of professional sorrow cracking to reveal a deep, weary disbelief. I marched toward her, my grief momentarily incinerated by a white-hot rage. "Carol," I said, my voice dangerously low. "What in God's name are you doing?" She didn't even look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the piece of paper on her clipboard, as if it contained divine scripture. "I am enforcing Article 7, Section D, of the Harmony Creek Estates bylaws," she announced to the empty street. "Unauthorized parades, processions, and assemblies. Any convoy consisting of 3 or more vehicles requires a permit submitted to the board no less than 30 business days in advance. Mr. Henderson had reached us now, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were approaching a wild animal. "Ma'am," he began, his voice a masterclass in strained professionalism, "this is a funeral procession. We are on our way to the cemetery to lay a man to rest." "And I am very sorry for his loss," Carol said, the words dripping with insincerity. She finally lifted her eyes, cold and flat as slate. "However, his loss does not exempt him or his estate from the rules that make Harmony Creek the premier planned community in this county. Did you submit the permit?" I gaped at her, my mouth opening and closing like a fish. "A permit? For a funeral?" My voice cracked with incredulity. "Are you actually insane? We don't know when people are going to die 30 business days in advance, Carol. That's not how mortality works." "Then perhaps he should have planned his passing with the community guidelines in mind," she retorted, a flicker of victory in her eyes. "The rules are the rules. They are what separate us from chaos." Chaos. She was saying this while a hearse, a literal vessel of human tragedy, was being forced to idle in the middle of the street because her SUV was parked like a toddler had left a toy there. The irony was so thick, I felt like I could choke on it. "You want us to unplan the funeral? To put him back in the freezer for 30 business days while we fill out your paperwork?" I was getting louder now, my voice echoing slightly in the unnatural quiet. "There is no need for sarcasm," she sniffed. "There is a solution. You may proceed one vehicle at a time, with a minimum of 5 minutes between each departure. That would not constitute a procession, and would be in full compliance with the bylaws." Mr. Henderson looked like he might faint. "Ma'am, that would completely defeat the purpose of a funeral procession. It's meant to be a gesture of respect, of solidarity. Respect for the rules is the highest form of solidarity in a community," she said, quoting what I was sure was the HOA mission statement. The back door of the third car opened, and my Aunt Mildred, a woman whose fiery spirit had been temporarily banked by grief, emerged. She was small, clad in black, but she advanced on Carol like a battleship. "You let my brother Morty pass, you wicked, wicked woman," she yelled, shaking a small, wrinkled fist. "He put up with your nonsense for 20 years. Can't you let him have this one last ride in peace?" Carol actually took a half step back, momentarily flustered, before her training kicked in. "Ma'am, your emotional outburst is in danger of violating the noise ordinance, Article 9, Section C. Please keep your voice at a conversational level." This was it, the apex of absurdity, arguing about noise ordinances while blocking a funeral. I felt a wave of utter helplessness wash over me. She was an immovable object of pure, weaponized pettiness. We couldn't physically move her car. Calling the local cops would take an hour, and by then the service would be missed, the whole day ruined. She had won. Carol, in the most grotesque and unbelievable way imaginable, had managed to triumph over Uncle Morty one last time. I slumped against the hood of my car, defeated. I was about to tell Mr. Henderson to just have everyone turn around, to find another way, when a new sound pricked the air. It was faint at first, a distant whine, but it grew rapidly. A siren. But it wasn't the familiar whoop-whoop of a local police cruiser. This was a high-pitched, insistent, European-style wail, the kind you hear in movies. And it wasn't just one. It was a chorus of them, growing louder, closer, and angrier with every second. Around the bend on Tranquility Drive, moving at a speed that was anything but tranquil, came the cavalry. It was a full-blown VIP motorcade. 2 sleek state police motorcycles, their red and blue lights strobing violently, led the charge. Behind them were 2 imposing black Suburbans with tinted windows, flanking a long, gleaming black limousine that screamed important government person. 2 more Suburbans followed, with another pair of motorcycles bringing up the rear. They were a river of official urgency, and we were a boulder in their stream. I watched Carol's face. It was a beautiful, theatrical progression of emotions. First, confusion, then annoyance, as if this were just another inconvenience she had to manage. Then, as the lead motorcycle didn't slow down, a dawning flicker of panic. She seemed to genuinely believe that her HOA authority was a universal constant, that these newcomers, whoever they were, would have to yield to Article 7, Section D. The lead motorcycle screeched to a halt, its front tire mere inches from the pristine white bumper of Carol's SUV. The state trooper riding it was a large man, clad in leather and authority. He flipped up the visor on his helmet, and his eyes, hard and unforgiving, scanned the scene, the hearse, the line of mourners' cars, and the ridiculous, illegally parked SUV blocking the entire road. He got off his bike with a fluid motion that spoke of years of practice, the entire motorcade stopping silently behind him. The air was suddenly thick with the idling of powerful engines. He strode toward Carol, his boots clicking on the asphalt. His name tag read Miller. He did not look happy. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble, like gravel being poured into a drum. "What is your vehicle doing in the middle of the road?" Carol, puffing up her chest, summoned the last vestiges of her self-importance. "Officer," she began, her voice haughty, "I am the president of this homeowners association, and this is an unauthorized procession that I have—" Officer Miller cut her off with a single, sharp gesture. "I don't care if you're the Queen of England," he snapped, his voice slicing through her arrogance. "You are obstructing a state police-escorted motorcade. You have 10 seconds to move this vehicle, or it will be moved for you, and you will be placed under arrest for interfering with official police business." He glanced at his watch. "Your 10 seconds started 5 seconds ago." The color drained from Carol's face. Her entire world, a carefully constructed kingdom of bylaws and beige paint, had just collided with a far greater, more powerful reality. Her HOA presidency meant less than nothing here. She fumbled in her purse for her keys, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grasp them. "Yes, but for the record," she sputtered, a pathetic attempt to salvage a shred of dignity. "They didn't have a permit." Officer Miller ignored her completely. He turned his head slightly and spoke into the radio on his shoulder. "Yeah, dispatch. I need a unit to issue a citation. White SUV, license plate." He leaned over and read it with undisguised contempt. HOA rules. Illegally stopped vehicle, obstructing a roadway, failure to yield to an emergency escort. As Carol finally scrambled into her car, a second officer, looking bored and impossibly crisp in his uniform, calmly emerged from one of the Suburbans. He pulled out a ticket book and, with the serene air of a man doing his daily paperwork, began writing the citation. The sight was glorious. It was poetic. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my entire life. Carol, the ultimate enforcer of rules, the scourge of mismatched mailboxes and festive squirrels, was getting slapped with a stack of moving violations that would probably cost her a fortune in fines and insurance points. She snatched the ticket from the officer's outstretched hand, her face a mask of pure fury and humiliation. Without another word, she threw the SUV in drive, tires squealing on the pavement, and sped away. Officer Miller watched her go, a flicker of something, amusement? Pity? In his eyes. Then he turned his gaze to our sad little lineup. He looked at the hearse, at Mr. Henderson's stunned face, and then at me. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. He gave a slow, single nod, a gesture of understanding from one professional to another. "You're clear," he said, Have a safe trip." And just like that, he was back on his motorcycle. With a roar of engines, the entire motorcade surged forward, vanishing down the road as quickly and surreally as it had appeared. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was a bird chirping in one of Harmony Creek's perfectly manicured regulation trees. Then, my Aunt Mildred let out a sound that was half sob, half giggle. A moment later, my cousin Sarah started laughing. Soon, all of us, the small band of mourners standing in the middle of Tranquility Drive, were laughing. We were laughing through our tears, a wave of hysterical, cathartic release washing over us. I looked up at the clear blue sky, a wide grin spreading across my face. He would have loved this, I thought. He would have paid good money to see this. The rest of the funeral was beautiful. The somber ceremony at the cemetery was tinged with the lingering energy of our bizarre victory. We laid Uncle Morty to rest, but it didn't feel entirely like a goodbye. It felt more like a passing of the torch. At the small reception back at the house, the standoff at Serenity Lane was already the stuff of legend. The story was told and retold, each telling a little more dramatic, Officer Miller a little more heroic, Carol's SUV peeling out a little more frantically. It was the perfect, chaotic, triumphant send-off for a man who had cherished all three of those things. Dave, the contractor, who had heard the whole story from my cousin, was beaming. He slapped me on the back, nearly knocking me into the infamous pink flamingo. "See, Frankie," he said, his eyes twinkling. "The universe provides. Sometimes it provides a gentle breeze. Other times it provides a gubernatorial motorcade to smite your enemies." He then unveiled his plan to fix the garage wall, and I knew in that moment that I wasn't selling the house. I couldn't. Morty's work here wasn't done. "So," Dave began, sketching on a napkin, "the bylaws say the repair has to use approved materials and colors, right? And it has to be structurally sound and aesthetically harmonious." "Yeah, so?" I said. "We get the beige stucco, we slap it on, and it's over." Dave shook his head slowly, a grin spreading across his face. "Or, we build the wall perfectly to code. We use bricks, and we use every single approved earth tone brick color in the Harmony Creek swatch book. There are 12 of them: beige, taupe, sand, stone, clay, dirt, mud, dust." He was ticking them off on his fingers, his excitement growing. "We'll lay them in a completely random, pixelated mosaic pattern. It will be technically unimpeachably harmonious, because it only uses pre-approved colors. But from a distance, it'll look like a giant computer threw up on the side of your garage. It will be the ugliest, most rule-abiding wall in the history of suburbia." He leaned in close, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "And there is not a single damn thing she can do about it." I started to laugh. It was brilliant. It was genius. It was exactly what Uncle Morty would have done. "Dave," I said, "you're an artist." "I dabble," he said with a shrug. A week later, the work was done. Dave and I stood on the lawn, 2 cans of cold beer in our hands, admiring our handiwork. The wall was a masterpiece. It was glorious. It was hideous. It was a chaotic, dizzying patchwork of beiges and browns and tans, a testament to the beauty of malicious compliance. It was structurally perfect and aesthetically deranged. It was my new favorite thing in the entire world. Right on cue, Carol's white SUV pulled into her driveway across the street. She got out, her movements still stiff with indignation from the week before. She went to her mailbox, pulled out her letters, and then she turned, and she saw it. I savored every moment of her reaction. First, the squint of confusion. Then, the widening of her eyes in disgust. Then, the tightening of her jaw in pure, unadulterated rage. And finally, the slow, dawning horror as her brain, conditioned by years of studying the bylaws, processed the terrible truth. It was legal. It followed all the rules. The wall was untouchable. She couldn't issue a fine. She couldn't file a complaint. All she could do was stare at the monument to her own defeat. She shot me a look of such concentrated hatred that I felt it might actually singe my lawn. Then, defeated, she turned and stormed into her perfectly beige house, slamming the door behind her. I saw curtains twitch in the neighboring houses. A few people were pointing. One of them I could have sworn was laughing. I took a long, satisfying drink of my beer. I propped my foot up on the base of the 7-foot-tall, hot pink flamingo, which was staying right where it was. I looked at the ugly, beautiful wall, a permanent tribute to a man who knew that the best way to fight a stupid war was with a brilliant, stupid joke. Then I looked up at the sky. "Your watch is over, Morty," I said quietly, raising my can in a toast. "I'll take it from here, and don't you worry. I'll make sure the squirrels remain excessively flourished."